There were a lot of things we were paying for marketing wise that, hadn't ever yielded us a case, but we were continuing just to kind of toss money out the window month after month. And so the kind of first step was just trying to figure out what's working and what's not.
You have to create that recession of your own making to really understand that the last thing that you got is marketing, because you're cutting into revenue. You're not slashing an expense, you're cutting into revenue. You're just not going to see it for a quarter or two, but soon enough, you're going to see that you slashed your revenue instead of saving expenses. Hi there. I have a small but really meaningful favor to ask you. I watch at the stats on our YouTube channel and Spotify channel, wherever most people listen and watch our podcast. And I see that over 80% of everybody who listens to it regularly is not a subscriber. I'm asking you to subscribe to this channel. And the reason for that is my mission and the mission of my team is to help as many small law firm owners to learn how to transform their law firms into better businesses, and so they in turn enjoy better lives. When you hit subscribe button, you tell these platforms that this is content worth listening, worth viewing, and they in turn will show it to many other small law firm owners and hopefully help me fulfill our mission of helping them create a better business and enjoy better lives. So would you please do me this favor? It would mean the world to me, and hit the subscribe button. And my promise to you is that I will continue to work hard at creating good content with practical ideas that help you and your teams grow better law firms. Thank you. Welcome to another great podcast episode of GLF Podcast. I have an amazing guest with me here today. His name is Ben Leader. Ben Leader is a personal injury attorney who is actually scaling back his personal injury work and is starting to mostly focus on marketing and intake management. In fact, Ben did not find his law firm. His dad was one of the co-founding partners all the way back in 1980. Ben joined the team approximately 10 years ago, and where Ben absolutely excelled at, he made the firm so much more better. So generated so much more revenue for the firm and so much more profit. Ben, welcome to the show. I'm excited about hearing how you did the things that I just mentioned.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a mighty kind introduction, and I'm happy to be here and excited to share anything I can to hopefully provide some value to others.
Yes, please. So you were with the firm for 6 years, give or take, before you started diving into marketing and intake. What led to this transition from purely working on the cases to focusing on marketing and intake?
That's a great question. Yeah, my first 6, 7 years here, it was mainly just practicing law. Had a lot of workers' comp cases at the time. Also did personal injury, pre-lit, litigation. Was kind of just doing a little bit of everything. And I enjoyed practicing law. I enjoyed helping people, working with clients, and kind of the personal interactions we get to have. But the marketing piece always intrigued me a lot. We had some billboards around town, and we did some marketing. And I had always had some questions about, why do we do this on the billboard? Trust was our motto at the time. And I was like, that's great, but it really doesn't tell people what we do. And so I found myself just kind of questioning a lot of the marketing and just intrigued by it because it's something that's not easy to figure out. And I kind of get invigorated just by the challenge of it. And it wasn't intentional for me to get into kind of management at all. We were actually out at a CLE in Las Vegas in the fall of 2021. And our director of operations at the time abruptly let us know that she was putting in her 2-week notice. And so she had been kind of running things since I had joined the firm and was really the main person overseeing the management, the finances, the marketing, while all of the attorneys at the time really just focused on our cases. We were all practicing law, but none of us were really intricately involved in running the business itself. And so we came back from Vegas, and we were trying to figure out, how do we get by until we, make a new hire and bring somebody else in to kind of pass her duties along to. And the plan was for me to temporarily fill in as the marketing guy for a few months until we, figured it out. And here we are, 3 years later, and I'm still the marketing guy. But what we found is once we got involved and started peeling back the layers of the onion, we just realized we had a lot of problems. We had gotten too far removed from kind of the pulse of the firm. We were spending a lot of money on things that we weren't tracking the return on those investments. And we learned that there were a lot of things we were paying for marketing wise that, hadn't ever yielded us a case, but we were continuing just to kind of toss money out the window month after month. And so the kind of first step was just trying to figure out what's working and what's not. And during that process, we realized we really had no data. We had been around for 40 years, but we had no centralized, place where our marketing data was kept. And so, despite being a, 3-4 decade old firm, I couldn't tell you where our cases were coming from. And so once I kind of, put the boots on and dove in and rolled my sleeves up, I just started really enjoying it, and really starting to get more passionate about it. And we actually joined a PILMA Mastermind group shortly thereafter. And it was the perfect timing because I was kind of fresh and new into the role, didn't really know what I was doing. And we joined one of Ken Hardison's groups, and that was the perfect place for us at the perfect time, because suddenly it opened these doors to kind of having an advisory board of other law firm owners that we could run stuff by and really give me guidance and roadmaps for what to do and what not to do. And so I kind of, took charge of the marketing and some of the management, and then immediately got in the room with these law firm owners that were a lot more successful than I was, and that kind of gave me a roadmap for success. And I mean, we just saw the immediate impact within, the first 3 months of joining that group. We figured out some things to really increase our Google reviews. And then suddenly we started getting a lot more SEO cases and, Maps Packs cases, and leads started pouring in. And it was like the floodgates just opened, and we really hadn't done anything to spend more money on marketing. We just started looking at ourselves kind of internally and tweaking some things. And, I think the problem was more so with our own processes than it was anything, we were spending money on.
Super interesting. So this happens in many companies, including very large corporations, where a key figure, someone from top management, leaves, and then people pour in and they look at what has been done or what hasn't been done often. And the discovery made is usually like,
Oh
oh
yeah.
my God.
Yeah. A little bit sickening. Yeah.
Years, right? This is not weeks, this is not quarters. It's years of mismanaging things. So I'm sure that you were sick in your stomachs when she said that she was going to leave and she gave you that 2-week notice.
We
But that was a
absolutely were.
serious blessing in disguise.
It really was. And looking back on it, now we realize we had just spread her too thin. I mean, that role alone, I think, could have focused on any one of those buckets, and she had, 4 or 5 of them. And so, looking back on it, I think we kind of, had that position set up to not succeed just because there was too many directions, being pulled too many different ways. And we actually decided to not replace, an operations manager, and we actually hired our first intake manager a few months later. And that one of the best decisions we've ever made. We never had an intake department before her. We thought we signed up most of the cases we wanted. Couldn't have been more wrong about that. Now I realize most of those leads never got to us to realize, that we either signed or didn't sign. There was a lot of leakage and slippage along the way. Things were falling through the cracks. And the combination of kind of the mastermind group and then the intake manager coming on was really the perfect formula for us.
Yeah. So many great insights there. One of them is that if you have a key employee who is focused on marketing and you trust that employee, remember what Ronald Reagan said something around 1986, a couple of years before you were born. I'm a little bit older, I remember. Trust but verify.
Oh, yeah.
Best yet, I do believe that if you have a sizable firm, there should be one of the managing partners who is in charge of oversight of marketing. And the reason for that is, if you think about it, there is no more valuable function within your business than marketing. Yes, you practice law, but at the end of the day, your law firm rises or falls with lead volume. That's all there is to it.
That's exactly right.
Law is what you deliver, but how you deliver it is by getting cases. How do you get cases? By marketing, generating leads.
That's right.
So such a blessing in disguise that you got her. Let me ask you this. So when you took over, and we did this a little bit before we hit the record button, you mentioned that the law firm was in decline revenue-wise for 3 years straight. If you don't mind sharing, 2020 revenue, 2020 was a typical year. 2019 revenue versus what it is that you're projecting to do this year, 2024. And for folks watching this or reading this, we are recording this at the tail end of the year.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm trying to think specifics. 2020, I think, was a tough year for everybody in our line of work, and it was a big step down. It was a terrible year. And I think that was actually my first full year as a partner. And so, I finally make the partnership. I'm finally in the room, and, there's not a lot of talk of bonuses going around that year. But, we had ups and down years. I mean, it had been a roller coaster, good year,
Yep.
bad year, good year, bad year. Then 2021 was actually even worse for us. We took an even further dip, and that was where the sleepless nights, I think, started
Yep.
coming around a
Do
lot
you
more.
remember the numbers, like top line, the revenue number for
So I know
2021?
from 2021 to 2022, I remember we took a 40% increase in revenue. And then I think in 2022 to 2023, we took another 30% increase in revenue. And over the course from 2021 to now, we've taken about a 250% increase in signed cases.
All right, that's
Um,
that's absolutely amazing.
we were
A,
around 165 a year in 2020, 2021 in
yep.
terms of new cases that we were signing each year. And we're on pace to hit 600 this year is our goal. So really excited about kind of the growth. And there's been a lot of growing pains along the way too. It hadn't all been, sunshine and roses, a lot of infrastructure you got to get in place to
Sure.
handle that increase. But, really the sign case, I think, we went 165 to 363 our first year with intake and with masterminds. And then we went from 363 to 512 last year. And again, we're on pace to do 600 this year. And I think the craziest part of all that for me was that we weren't spending more money on more marketing campaigns. We really shifted those funds internally to
You
hire an
made it
intake
better.
manager and bring in some consultants and get educated, through mastermind groups. And I think that was the best money we've ever spent, is kind of the internal work on ourselves versus, more leads or TV or radio or whatever it may be.
Got it. So super interesting. So you went from 165 in 2021 to close to 600 this year.
That's right.
That is almost a fourfold increase in 3 years time span. That is really hard to manufacture in a mature organization. And your organization at the time when you started working on this was in its fifth decade.
That's
What a
right.
remarkable turnaround. So you mentioned that at the worst point, or one of the worst points for the firm, you joined PILMA with Ken Hardison. What role did that play in this amazing rise in your revenue?
It played a massive role. When I look back on it, I think there were really two decisions we made that I would say were the most impactful kind of in our growth and success. And the first was without a doubt joining the mastermind group. Not only the other kind of group law firm owners that we're around that kind of can serve as an advisory board for us, they're super helpful, but just Ken himself is a tremendous resource. And he is connected with me with so many vendors and other lawyers that have helped me in so many different ways. I feel like he's kind of the king of legal marketing networking, and he's just a fun guy to be around. And so Ken is a huge part of our success, and tremendously grateful to him for just the opportunities he's given me and the support he's given us. And we actually even brought him into our firm and, worked with him kind of individually on a consulting basis for a while. And I'm also, still involved in his mastermind groups. But the mastermind group in and of itself led us to hire an intake consultant, lady by the name of Yanni Smith. Company's called Legal Intake Pros. And that was a concept I had never even heard of, and would never probably still know that it even existed, but for PILMA and masterminds. And what she did was come in and really help us build an intake team, build a system that really can run efficiently, and a place for our leads to be centralized and located where we can all see in real time what's going on, follow up procedures, chase protocols, and everything from the messaging sequencing to making sure that we've got integrations with FileVine and automations, and taking advantage of the UTM tags, and it really just opened all these doors that we didn't know existed that allowed us to manage our team so much better.
And let's focus on this. So 2021, prior to joining PILMA, if you know the numbers, what was the conversion rate? From
We
you get 100 leads, how many of them would you sign?
Yeah, so we don't know how bad it really was, but I know that our first few months when we started, we were in the mid 50s. We were right around 52, 55% when we
Conversion
started
rate.
tracking it. And that was with an intake manager. And so prior to that, it makes me sick to even think about how low it probably was, because before that, it was attorneys and paralegals fielding these calls. And I mean, that is just a recipe for a disaster.
Do you think it was 10%,
In my
15%, if you
head,
had to
I was
guess?
thinking 30s, probably somewhere in the 30s if I had to guess. Out of the ones that would actually make it to an attorney's desk, I think we were probably pretty high, but I think there was a lot of leads that never made it that far, that never got calls back, or we didn't chase properly, or, we just had a completely different mindset then, where we didn't want to bother people. We thought if people wanted help, they'd call us back. And, just everything wrong with the legal intake world were things that we were doing for years.
Based on what you're telling me and what I know, because I have worked with hundreds of law firm owners, my suspicion, and I could be wrong, is that your conversion rate, when I say conversion rate, you got a lead and you converted them into a signed case, was probably significantly less than 30%,
Oh
just
yeah,
based on
yeah.
what
No,
you're telling
sorry.
me.
I was thinking wanted leads, total leads. Yeah,
Oh,
I
no,
would
total leads,
agree. Yeah,
total
total
leads.
leads. Absolutely. We were probably in the teens or the single
That
digits.
10% is
Yeah,
more often than not, when it's not well managed, when intake is not a well managed function, it's around 10%.
that's right.
So, and you're at, what is it today?
So we're hovering right around 80% today. I think one of our intake team members is right around 78, and one of them's right around 82. And that's about a 10% increase from last year. And so we've seen a steady step up each year. And I'll tell you, man, that the intake conversions is a hard thing to improve. I hear a lot of people tell me that they're in the 90% range. And I have a hard time believing that for a lot of firms, just because if you're really tracking every single lead and you're
Yeah,
really entering those, I mean, that it's really hard to do. And so we were thrilled to hit 80% this year. And, our goal is still to eventually get the wanted signups in the 90% range, but it's been a slow, steady build over the last few years to even get that,
yeah,
the wanted rate from the mid 50s into the high 70s.
yeah. So you went from 30% on the wanted rate to 80%. This is an increase of over 260%, 270%, somewhere there. So if you got 100 leads before, you would get 30. Now you get 80. What's an average case value?
So last year, our average fee, the last 2 years, was right around 17,000, just over 17,000. It's dipped a little bit this year. We hadn't had quite the big outlier case that we typically have, but if you remove those from the equation, we're usually hovering right around 15,000.
Got it. So let's imagine that 15,000 was flat over the years, just for simplicity of math. So back in the day, just before you hired the intake manager and started optimizing, you would convert 30% of wanted leads, let's say out of 100. So that's $450,000 worth of case values. Today you do 80, that's 1.2 million. That's a big spread. And we're not talking about the increased number of leads. We're talking about same lead volume, not spending a dime more
That's right.
on marketing.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I did the math this year, and our newest intake team member, we had her improvement 10% this year, essentially from last year. And I ran the numbers just based on the average fees and the volume that she handles, and it equated to an increase of 50 cases, signed cases for us, which, based on the math, 800 plus thousand in revenue that, that increased conversion is going to bring hopefully down the road. And so you've already spent the money on these leads. You've already spent the money on marketing. They're already at your doorstep. It's just capturing. And, a lot of people want to grow their law firm, and everybody just jumps straight to marketing. And I feel like this is just such low hanging fruit, because
100%.
it's the easiest, the cheapest, I
Yeah.
think the most straightforward way of growth.
Yeah. Congrats on hitting that 80%. In many markets, that number is not fathomable. Like if you're in New York City or Miami, don't worry about that number. If you get hit 30, 40%, you're ahead of the game. If you can hit 50%, you're doing phenomenal well. Hey, full disclosure, you operate in North Carolina and South Carolina, right?
That's right.
not the cutthroat markets that I just mentioned. So
That's right.
it's a bit different. So you have to put it into that context. If you're listening and you're in Chicago where I am and you're like, what do you mean 80%? That is impossible. That would be impossible in Chicago, or highly, highly, highly unlikely. Right.
That's
But
right.
in North Carolina, and again, 80%. Wow, you're now in the world of like tiny marginal improvements. If you could get to 82, 84%, that would
Yeah,
be
it's a lot
mind
harder to
blowing.
see those, 1 to 2%
Yeah,
increases now, and we're trying some new things with kind of the chase process and incorporating some video into
yeah.
it just to try to play
Good for
with some
you.
things to see what may work a little better. And
Good, good for
I
you.
think
Imagine you would have never taken ownership of this function. Where do you think the firm would be today?
it's kind of scary, and I don't know that I'd be here right now. I may be working as an associate at a big firm, starting over again. So it definitely was not trending in the right direction. And I don't think it's that easy for everybody. I think we had put decades worth of marketing into into building a reputation and a brand, and that does make it a lot easier. The leads were already there, we just weren't capturing them. But I do think, like every firm, regardless of size or age, there's opportunities here with intake and optimization that everybody is kind of missing the boat on.
Excellent point. So, if you're listening to this, watching this, reading this, and you're thinking about getting a professional intake manager, don't think about it. That investment will be absolutely free and in a big hurry. As long as you're getting inquiries, that investment, obviously, if you have very few leads, that investment will not pay for itself because, well, you have a different problem. But if you have inquiries coming in and you or your paralegal or your receptionist are handling those and you think that they're doing a fine job, got something else coming to you. I mean, you're
Yeah.
going to find out and you're going to be sick to your stomach. Multiplying the number of errors made over the years,
Oh, yeah.
that is expensive. So don't think about it. If you don't mind my asking, what does an intake manager cost you on an annual basis?
So we've got a lot of incentives tied into ours, but typically I think we've got two roles here, a manager and a coordinator. And typically
Mm-hmm.
the coordinator starts somewhere in the mid to 50 range. And,
Yep.
South Carolina money goes a lot further here than it does
Sure.
a lot of places. And
Yeah.
then the manager is usually, you know, 15-20% higher than that.
Got it.
And then we do have some incentives tied to their conversion rates. And that's been a game changer, is not only bringing on the intake team, but incentivizing them. And, bonus structures tied to increase in improvements in conversions has been a big piece of it. Honestly, giving them some independence to sign up certain cases that meet certain criteria has really helped. The more we try to plug attorneys into the process, the more bogged down it gets, and the more people get delayed or get pushed off for a few days, and the more leakage we've got. So we've kind of got it down now where there's certain clear cases that are clear signups, and if those folks are willing to go ahead and sign up and let the attorney get started on the case versus having to have that conversation all over again to sell them on signing up, that's been a huge part of that improvement, is just giving them some independence. And I think it all cuts against the way we've always been taught to think as lawyers, that a lawyer needs to be involved in every step of the process, and that people want to talk to a lawyer and only a lawyer. And we've just learned that that's just not the case. They won't help right then and there. If it's a paralegal or an intake person, that's fine more often than not.
I know exactly which of our clients I'm going to send this short video clip
Well,
because
it's funny that,
we have
your
plenty of
role
those.
too. The first thing we did when we started having these slow years and the problems, the very first thing we did was blame our SEO company. Why are we not getting more leads and more cases? And our old SEO company, I'm actually very grateful for, because they were the ones that asked us the questions. Where are you getting your cases from? How many are coming from billboards? And we all kind of just stared at them, and nobody could, answer any of them. And they started following up with me on leads saying, hey, this looked like a good one. What happened with it? And I found myself making just excuse after excuse after excuse, or, so-and-so's set to call this one on Tuesday. So-and-so's going to call back if they're hurt, or if they end up seeing a specialist. And just going through that process and then actually forcing myself to listen to a few of those calls, it's eye-opening. And if you don't think you have problems, just go listen to a few of your phone calls, and you will be sick to your stomach.
Yeah. So What do you think is the ROI on those intake managers? It sounds like, based on the numbers you told me, probably like 12 to 15 to 1.
Yeah, I was thinking at least 10 to 1 without a
Yeah.
doubt. I think
Mhm.
they probably make or lose firms more money than anyone realizes.
Yeah.
Best ROI you can find, I think, is in intake.
Yeah. So there you go, folks. You're listening to this, and if you're still on the fence, imagine that you were able to put $1 in the bank and a year later take $10 back. It's that straightforward. As long as they're good, condition number one, as long as they're good. Number two, as long as you're getting the leads.
That's right. You can
Yeah.
have the best intake manager and be the best trial lawyer in the world, but if you're not getting the leads in the door, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So let's talk about that part of the equation. Obviously, fourfold, almost fourfold growth in your case volume. Case that didn't just come from hiring intake managers. What did you do on the marketing side to see such an improvement?
Yeah, so the craziest thing is that very first year when we jumped from 165 to 363, I think it was, we actually pulled back 120,000 from marketing and shifted those over to intake and consulting. We brought, we joined PILMA. We brought Ken on to do some consulting for us. We brought the intake pros to come on and do some consulting for us. So that first year, we actually spent six figures less in marketing and obtained that growth. But
Where
sadly,
did you, what part of marketing did you pull from?
it was a digital campaign that mainly involved pay per click and banner ads and kind of one of the package deals that with a large national vendor that kind of has a little bit of everything: streaming, radio, banner
Oh, got
ads.
it.
Yeah, and
Got it. A lot of different things.
yeah, and obviously we can't tie any real, cases to that entire campaign and,
Yeah.
really couldn't gauge anything from it. But I remember being terrified, like, we're pulling these funds back. We're going to just fall off a cliff with cases. And it was the total opposite. And the first thing we did was figure out our phone system. We had a disaster of a phone setup. And I had kind of always just stuck my head in the sand and assumed our phones worked. But we had an audit done for a month and learned that we were missing 18% of our incoming calls. Over half of those were first time callers. So again, you talk about 30 years worth of marketing and leads and, how many of those just went straight down the drain.
So 10% of your sales inquiries, like they were looking to buy your services, they just went unanswered.
That's right.
Got it.
That's right.
Okay.
And we had no idea. And so the first thing we did was we switched to a different answering service, overflow after hour service. The one we were using was obviously dropping the ball in a major way. We switched phone systems as well. We had a system that it just wasn't, the overflow call chart wasn't working like it should. And so we brought on a new phone system, a new after hours service. And that alone, we saw our leads going from around 100 a month when we first started tracking things. Within 6 months, we were around 200 a month. And I don't think that was more, it wasn't like we were getting a lot more of them. We just were tracking them and answering the phone and capturing them. And so
What was the starting number?
it was when we first started tracking the leads, we were pacing at about 100 a month. Our first month, I think, was 98 leads that we had entered. And then
And
six
then
months
200
later, yep, 200.
because you were doing things the right way on the phone.
That's right.
Got it.
That's right. And, we had really never had like a chase process. We had always kind of thought that didn't fit the professional look that we
Mm.
wanted to have. That, if somebody wanted to hire us, they would contact us, they would call us back. And that's another thing that we couldn't have been more off on. And I'm the same way. Sometimes it takes the pharmacy calling me 5 times before I go pick up my prescription. And, sometimes you just catch people at the right place and time. And we have started signing a ton of cases where we're contacting people 3, 4, 5 times before we signed that case. And so just having a clear kind of follow-up protocol, not putting the ball in their court, but us proactively
Mm.
checking in and reaching back out has been a game changer too.
Wow, that's incredible. So 100 to 200 leads per month by fixing the phone system and
Yep.
the intake process. You replace the people who used to do your overflow. Got it.
That's right. And
S-
again, it's not going to be that easy for everybody because everybody's not as messed up as as we were, back in 2022. But it made a huge difference. And so, I get a lot of credit around the office for marketing, but really the marketing, I don't think was the big piece of the equation. I think we have figured more and more of that out along the way. And now we're finally, allocating resources. And now that we've got the infrastructure in place, we feel like we can handle more volume. But the marketing, I think, was definitely second to intake in terms of driving that growth in leads and cases.
What did you do on the marketing side to get to the point where you're basically quadrupled in volume in 3 years?
Yeah. So when I first started, I remember my first year, I laid out a marketing budget and allocated every penny of every dollar I had to certain campaigns in December before the year even started. And then come like June, we were out of money. Everybody's asking us, new ideas are coming along, and we fully allocated everything. So the next year,
Well, forgive me for interruption. What percentage of revenue did you allocate to your marketing budget?
so this is kind of embarrassing. We've always been very low in terms of true marketing dollars. If you remove the intake piece of it and you remove kind of the consulting funds, because I couch those
That's
as
not
marketing
marketing.
just for budgeting purposes.
Yeah.
But if you remove all that, we were around 8 or 9%. So we were
Super
low.
low.
Yeah,
Got it.
and now we're this year we're going to end up closer to 12, and next year we're shooting for 15. And so
Got
we
it.
we made some strides lately, but
Yeah.
we had not tracked data either, as I mentioned earlier. And so once we got through that first year, suddenly I had lead docket with a year's worth of case data and marketing sources. And so what we did in 2023, instead of just allocating everything, we just kind of did it quarterly and gave ourselves the ability to pivot and
Amazing.
allocate
Yeah.
resources. And so like one of the things we did this year is we realized, we're getting a lot more GMB cases than we have in the past from the
hmm
MAPS packs, and ranking locally a lot better than we have. And so we went up
GMB, just for those who may not know, stands for Google Made Business.
thanks. And
It's
sorry about that. And I
yeah,
guess it's got a new term now that they use too. I can't
yeah,
ever keep up with it, but
yeah,
GBP now.
yeah.
And so we went and opened 2 satellite offices and pivoted some funds from LSAs and things that were not
Sure.
necessarily working as well. And
hmm
we kind of pushed those chips into the category where we were getting the most traction and the least cost per case, and kind of double down on that. So now I'd say my strategy now is just to kind of constantly keep some wiggle room with our budget so that we can allocate and pivot along the way as we see the data tracking in different directions.
Got it. So it sounds like there were three key components to your fourfold growth. Number one, you joined the mastermind with Ken Hardison. Ken is a good guy. If you're listening to this and you ever thought about joining PILMA and you're in the PI space, by the way, if you're not in the PI space, that's okay. You should still join PILMA. I know it stands for Personal Injury Legal Marketing Association, but Management and Marketing Association. You will learn a ton even if you're not in the PI space. I am putting a plug in here for Ken because he's a great guy. PILMA is a great organization. It's been around for 14 years at the time of this recording. So this was first step that was instrumental. The second step was fixing the intake. That led to a huge ROI, and that's quick. And the third thing, you realize that you were overspending or not spending wisely in some marketing that was not producing any results. You mentioned a cacophony, different things in one monthly fee. You said it was radio and digital and something else, which would be impossible to track. Like, how do you know
That's
what's
right.
coming from where? So you cancel that, pulled back from that, invested into other things down the road. And you also have increased your budget by, it sounds like you said, started around 8, 9%. Now you're on track to do 15%
That's
with,
our goal for 2025. This year
yeah,
we're hovering around 12. So
okay,
we made some strides. I think
yeah,
we're spending more on the digital this year
yeah,
than we have in the past. And we've always had a really good kind of grassroots effort here. That's really where most of our cases came from when I started, was just a reputation around the area. One of my senior partners, Tommy Pope is his name. He was involved in a high profile case back in the 90s. Susan Smith was the lady's name. And she was in South Carolina and pushed her car into the lake with 2 young kids in it and
I
drowned
remember
them.
that one.
Yeah, and so it went kind of mass media. It was right around the OJ trial,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
that really propelled Tommy's career, his political career, his legal career. And so for years, we didn't really have to do a lot of marketing because everybody knew who Tommy was. But I've noticed some of the younger generation,
It's
they
been
don't know who
30
Susan
years.
Smith. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been 30 years. Yep.
Yeah.
And so we're having to market ourselves a little more now than we have in the past, but still very involved in the community. We try to be everywhere in terms of supporting different efforts here and charitable events.
That is part of your soon to be 15% marketing budget, or is that on top
That
of that?
is, yep,
That
that
is
is part
very
of that.
good. There's a great book that I would recommend if you want to accelerate your growth. It's called King of Growth by Louise Scott.
Oh
That
yeah.
guy, that guy took, have you heard of him?
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar with
All
Luis.
right,
He's
cool.
got an impressive background.
Yeah, he's been on this podcast a couple of times and he just laid it out. He's like, look, our marketing budget is 25% of our revenue, adjusted quarterly, meaning we add another $2 million in revenue next quarter. We're going to increase our marketing budget by 25% of $2 million,
I love
another
that.
500,000 bucks. He's like, to most attorneys, that is unfathomable. Like how 25%? And he's like, well, that's how you go from 5 million to 50 million in 6 years.
Yep, I love that.
Because
That's
that's
great.
how you fuel growth. I mean, it's just marketing. Like if you could tenfold number of leads, and let's say that your intake is optimized. There's nothing to fix in your intake. You increase your lead flow by tenfold, you're going to grow your revenue by tenfold. Obviously, in PI and continuous team-based fees, it's not going to be the next quarter, but in few quarters, you will have 10 times the revenue. That is why Learner and Row, I'm going to disclose because they're not super public about it, but they don't hide it either. Monthly lead flow, 9,000 leads.
Wow,
Yeah, that's how you get to about $300 million in revenue.
that's right.
And Morgan and Morgan, John Morgan is very public about it. 16% of his $1 billion revenue on an annualized basis goes to client attraction, also known as marketing and advertising. You would say, why? He doesn't need to spend 160 million. But he knows that just as Coca-Cola, if they cut their marketing and advertising budget, their share of the market will go down because Pepsi will start taking over. John Morgan knows that he needs to spend 16% of his $1 billion a year on marketing and advertising because that's where part of the billion comes from.
Oh yeah,
You need
we
to be
learned
able
that
to.
lesson the hard way. And
Yeah.
in 2015, we had a rough year, and we pulled back from marketing, and that set us up for an even worse year in 2016.
It's a
And
recession of your own making. That's what it
that's
is.
right,
Yeah.
that's right. And so nowadays, even on the bad years, the very last thing we'll be clinging on to is that marketing budget, and making sure we keep that in place.
That is for most specialist business owners. And when I say specialist, you're an attorney by trade, by training, by trade. Like when you start managing a law firm, and this applies to most, even seasoned law firm owners, you're still not an experienced executive. A big part of your
Exactly
day
right.
is spent on practicing law rather than practicing business. And to most, this lesson that the last thing that you cut is your marketing comes the very hard way. Like you have to create that recession of your own making to really understand that the last thing that you cut is marketing because you're cutting into revenue. You're not slashing an expense, you're cutting into revenue. You're just not going to see it for a quarter or two, but soon enough, you're going to see that you slashed your revenue instead of saving expenses. Speaking of time distribution, before we hit the record button, Ben, you mentioned that you still carry a 60 or 65 case load. That is correct for today?
Yep, that's right. Right around 65 right now.
And you're in charge. You own the marketing and you own the intake. Don't you find it that it's infinitely more valuable per hour of your time to focus on marketing and intake than it is on practicing law?
I do. I absolutely do. And, a year and a half ago, I was around 120 cases. And so
Okay.
when I first started doing the marketing, I was, full caseload. And so I've tried to trim it down, month by month and year by year and made some progress. But there's still a lot of days where I just feel like I'm bouncing back and forth. I can't really dive into anything because, spending some time on trying to dive deep into marketing data. And then there's a client crisis that, requires my attention. And
Yep.
so it's tough right now just to bounce around and try to do it all. But I feel like we've made a lot of progress, and we actually have a new associate starting in September. And so that's kind of my, I'm counting down
Wait,
the
we're
days.
recording in December.
That's
That's
right.
nine
Yep.
months away.
That's right. So I'm not counting the days or anything, but he'll be coming at a really good time, and he's clerking for a judge right now. I wish we could pull him away and have him start tomorrow, but I think that'll enable me to focus a little bit more on management. And I see in the mastermind groups, I see it every year where somebody will come in and say, I finally shed all my cases. I'm finally just focusing on the business now. And then the very next meeting, they'll be killing it. They'll be just exploding. And so I have seen it time and time again where the attorneys that have that managing partner that doesn't handle cases and just focuses on the business are the firms that seem to be having the most success.
I'm going to challenge you. How expensive is this that you're going to continue doing cases for the next 9 months or so?
Yeah, the hard part for me is that a lot of times it will be like a family friend of mine or a high school classmate of mine or a past client of mine that calls me. And so I've had a hard time passing those people off, and I'm bad at saying no. And so a lot of times I end up taking cases even when I don't need to because I've got this relationship or I originated the case. And, I think my law partners are starting to see more and more the benefit of what I've done on the marketing and management side. And a year or two ago, I would have felt the need to prove myself with my fee sheets and, really show my worth. But I'm much less concerned about that now, as long as the total picture of the firm is still moving in the right
Because
direction.
you're
But I
so
have
much more
noticed a
valuable.
direct correlation with the more I scale back. I've also noticed the revenue dips a little
Yep.
bit too. And so trying to keep both of those levers in the right direction has been a tricky balance.
Listen, if your intake is closing or converting at 80% rate, you don't need to fix very much there. It's just now about the lead volume.
That's
Who's
right.
who's got your leads?
Right.
Out of
Yeah.
out of 10 leads, how many of them are the ones that you want?
Me personally,
No.
or the
Firm.
firm.
The firm.
Yeah, so we're a little bit lower than we need to be here. I want to say this year we were right around 25% year to
Got it.
date in terms of wanted leads out of our total leads.
Got it. So who's got those 10 leads that are going to convert into 2 signed cases?
Hmm.
Because if you want 25% out of 10 leads, that's 2.5 leads, and you close 10, 20, 80% of them, that's 2 cases.
Hmm.
So wouldn't you be a lot more valuable if you figured out how to bring in 100 additional leads a month, which would result in, oh God, 20 more cases?
Absolutely.
Times 15,000, 300,000, times 12 months, $3.6 million.
It's a no brainer when you break it down that way. Absolutely.
So when are you going to quit taking cases?
That's good. Well, you've given me a good challenge. My goal now is, for us to have another conversation a year from now,
Okay.
and me to be under 10. That would be a perfect world.
How about a 0?
Zero would be. I don't know that I can ever go to zero because I think there's such a value in being able to see the case management system, see how it's working, and just being able to have the practice piece to it too, to some degree. I feel like when you get completely removed and you don't know how Filevine works at your own firm, that can lead to problems too. But yeah, a handful, it would be an ideal scenario for me.
I'm going to challenge you on that one.
Yeah,
Here's
I
why.
love
So
it.
Elon Musk knows how his Tesla cars are assembled. He still doesn't assemble them.
That's right.
Doesn't need to.
Yep.
He just knows that he has very capable people who assemble them.
That's exactly right. No, you're spot on. And I know that it needs to happen. It's one of those things that's just a lot harder to do than it sounds sometimes.
Just mindset.
That's right.
Just
Yeah.
just mindset.
You can't
That's
see
it.
that picture
I
back there.
saw.
That's just what it says, mindset back
Yeah.
there. So,
Oh, oh, that's right. I thought it says Michael, but nope, that's
yep,
mindset.
sorry.
That's
Mindset.
mindset. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And what does it say? Is that Tiger Woods? Give
Yeah. I'm a
something?
sports guy if you can't
Yeah,
tell.
I can
Yeah. It says,
tell.
Tiger says give everything
Give
there. So,
everything in
yeah,
mindset. All right. All right. So we'll book you for another episode a year from now.
that sounds
And
like a
I,
plan.
I really hope to hear that, man, we added another $3 million run rate, meaning we add $3 million in the next 12 months because I stopped working on cases and just started focusing on where's my next 100 leads going to come from? Additional 100 leads.
That's
Because that
right.
additional 100 leads, that's 20 cases times 15,000, 300,000 times 12 months, 3.6 million. You cannot, here's the thing. And this is something that a lot of specialists who love what they do lose sight of. What you do is not scalable. Like practicing law is not scalable. There's a
Yeah,
natural ceiling to it. But being an executive and working on marketing and intake is incredibly scalable because you don't do it with your own hands.
absolutely.
Like Glenn Lerner from Lerner and Rowe, I don't know every single door that they have open that 9,000 leads walk through every month, but they have enough doors open to get 9,000 leads through.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I met Glenn a couple of times and we talked about this, and he is like, I'm a damn good trial attorney. And I miss it some days, but then I look at how much money I'm making and I don't miss it no more.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's spot on. So I'll make that a goal of mine. I'm writing it down now. I've got
Yeah.
working on some goals for next year already. So we'll
Yeah.
add that one to the list.
I know you love sports. Maybe one day in the future you'll buy a team of your own, or maybe if you're into charity. I find that for a lot of guys who already make good money who are charitable, I am one of those people. For me, making more money equals to distributing more.
Absolutely.
Like once your needs are met very well, you're like, well, do I need to push myself or do I have enough? Well, if you every year if you set bigger goals for charitable distribution, that really can fuel you like nothing else.
Yeah,
Like my goal every year is to double what I give, to double.
I
It's
love that.
hard. It's hard, but I am on track. 10% of net income every year, at least 10% of net income. It's a good friend taught me this. He told me, God gave you that money, but that money is not yours.
That's
You
spot
were
on.
you were given it to give it away. So because for every entrepreneur, almost every entrepreneur I've ever met, and God, I've been a business owner operator for 23, 23, 23 years, December of 2001. And I've met thousands of business owners over the years through the podcast and through so many other things that I have done, like consulting. And just about everyone I met, they get to the point of enough. Like I'm making enough, but those who are very charitable, there's never enough.
That's right.
Like you don't want another boat, you don't want another house, you don't want another car, you don't want another vacation, but you want to give more now. So
That's
it's
right.
huge fuel for doing more.
Yeah,
Ben, it
you
was
get a lot more out of that at the end of the day than you do anything material that you're spending it
100%.
on.
100%. If your family is well fed, 100%. There's nothing more rewarding than
That's right.
seeing other families being well fed.
That's right.
Yeah. Ben, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed chatting with you. Hopefully, we get to cross paths soon and
A year,
can meet in person.
at least a year from now, we're going to meet once, at least. Maybe
That's
we'll
right.
cross paths somewhere else. I'm thinking about actually joining PILMA as a vendor, as a
Oh, that'd be
sponsor,
great.
rather.
Yeah,
So, but if nothing else, we'll see you next December.
that sounds like a
We'll
plan.
see how your story evolves in the next 12
I
months.
love it. I love the accountability.
Oh, for sure. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.